We're counting down the 15 forgotten axes every American man once knew by name. Tools that cleared the forests, framed the barns, and built this country long before a chainsaw ever coughed to life. Each entry carries the story of the men who swung them, the trades they fed, and the day a gas engine made them obsolete. Expect steel with purpose, patterns you've never heard of, and skills that died inside a single generation. Which vanished axe tops the list? Let's begin the countdown with number 15. Number 15, the boy's axe. The boy's axe was the first real steel a kid ever held, and it was never a toy. A head weighing 2¼ to 2¾ pounds hung on a 28-inch handle, roughly 2/3 the size of what his father carried, and it was sharpened just as keen. In the 1908 Sears Roebuck catalog, a boy's axe sold for around 70 cents, and farm families bought them the way they bought a boy his first pair of work boots, not as a gift, but as an assignment. The lesson started with the woodshed, kindling first, then limbing, then the standing deadwood at the edge of the pasture where a miss couldn't kill anybody. Fathers taught the same 3 rules everywhere from Vermont to Oregon: never chop with your feet where the bit can land, never swing when you're tired, and let the head do the work. The axe was deliberately light, so a 12-year-old could keep the stroke honest instead of muscling it. Once he could hit the same notch 100 times, the weight went up and the handle got longer. By the 1960s, that ladder was gone. Boys got a chainsaw at 20, or they got nothing at all, and the slow apprenticeship of the woodpile, years of it, teaching patience and aim and respect for edged steel, vanished in a single afternoon of pull cord and blue smoke. The boy's axe was never about wood. It was about turning a boy into someone you could trust in the timber. Number 14, the Hudson Bay axe. The Hudson Bay was the axe of men who had to carry everything they owned on their back. Its shape came straight from the French trade axes swapped to native trappers in the 1700s, a wide, flaring bit, and a narrow, tapering eye that used the least steel possible, because steel was the expensive part, and a canoe could only hold so much. American makers like Snow and Nellie of Bangor, Maine, and Marble Arms of Gladstone, Michigan, kept the pattern alive into the 20th century for a new customer: the packer, the surveyor, the deer hunter, and the man running a trap line through country with no road into it. A head of about 1 pound and 3/4 on a 24-inch handle, priced at roughly $2 in the 1930s. It lived in a leather sheath on a pack frame and did everything. It cut tent poles. It split kindling in the rain when a fire meant staying alive. It quartered game, drove stakes, and wrapped ice off a canoe gunnel. The trade-off was honest, and everybody knew it. That thin eye made the head prone to loosening, and the light weight meant you were never going to fell a big tree with it. Nobody cared because it weighed under 3 pounds, and it was there. As pickup trucks reached the trailheads and folding saws filled the packs, the Hudson Bay slid out of the outfitter catalogs and onto the wall of the hunting lodge decoration. It survives now as a shape people recognize without knowing why, the last living echo of the fur trade, hanging over a fireplace. Number 13, the shingling hatchet. Look closely at a shingling hatchet and you'll see a tool that solved 4 problems at once. The bit split cedar. The pole was hardened and milled flat to drive nails. The blade carried a row of gauge holes and an adjustable steel pin, so a roofer could set his exposure, 5½ inches say, and lay every course by hooking the pin on the butt of the shingle below. And the notch cut into the underside of the head pulled bent nails without a second tool. In 1925, a good one from Plum or Bluegrass cost about $1.25, and a roofing crew wore one on the hip the entire working day. A skilled man laid 1,000 cedar shingles in a shift, and the rhythm was hypnotic. Split, gauge, tap, tap, reach. The hatchet swung a few thousand times before quitting time, and men judged each other by the sound of it. The wrong sound meant a split shingle or a bent nail. The decline came in stages. Asphalt shingles arrived and nobody needed to split anything. Then the pneumatic nailer arrived in the 1960s and turned a two-strike nail into a hiss. Then the fire codes came, and half the cedar roofs in America were gone by 1990. The shingling hatchet was one of the most cleverly designed hand tools this country ever produced. A gauge, a hammer, a wedge, and a nail puller in one 2-pound package. And today it sits in flea market bins with the price pin still adjustable, and nobody in the aisle knows what the holes are for. Number 12, the Cooper's axe. Before cardboard, before steel drums, before the plastic tote, everything in America traveled inside a barrel. Flour, nails, whiskey, salt pork, gunpowder, apples, molasses. All of it moved in staved wooden vessels made by hand. And the man who made them started with a Cooper's axe. It looked wrong to anyone who wasn't in the trade. The bit was beveled on one side only, flat on the other, so it could shave a true face. The handle was short and often canted away from the body. The head was heavy for its size because the Cooper wasn't swinging it. He was letting it fall in short, controlled chops, listing each riven oak stave and roughing the taper before it ever touched a joiner plane. A journeyman Cooper in the 1880s turned out somewhere between 20 and 30 tight barrels a week. And in cities like Louisville and Cincinnati, whole blocks smelled of green oak and charred wood. The apprenticeship ran 7 years. Then two things ended it. Machine-made staves in the 1890s took the axe work away first, and by the 1930s, the corrugated box and the steel drum took the barrel itself. The Cooper's axe didn't fade. It dropped straight off a cliff. Today, its only surviving customer is the bourbon industry, and even there, the axe has been replaced by machinery that shapes a stave in under 2 seconds. A trade that once employed tens of thousands of American men left behind almost nothing but a strangely shaped piece of steel that most people mistake for a broken hatchet. Number 11, the mortising axe. Every timber frame barn standing in America today is held together by holes, and someone cut those holes with an axe. The mortising axe, sometimes called a post axe, and in its two-bladed form a twible, was built for one job: chopping a deep rectangular socket into a beam so a tenon could slide home and a peg could lock it forever. No nails, no bolts. The blade was narrow, sometimes barely an inch wide, and unusually long so it could reach 4 or 5 inches into a timber and lever the chips back out. A framer scored the mortise walls with a chisel, then went at it with the axe in short, brutal strokes, hooking out waste with the second blade or the corner of the bit. On a fence line, the same tool cut the through mortises in oak posts that let split rails sit without a single fastener, and a farmhand could turn out 30 posts a day if his edge held. By 1957, a barn went up with a nail gun and dimensional lumber in a fraction of the time, and the framer who once could hold a mortise square by eye in a timber he'd hewn himself had no place to sell that skill. The proof is still out there. Drive past a barn built in 1870 that hasn't moved an inch while newer buildings around it have sagged and split, and understand that it's standing because a man with a strange, narrow axe cut 100 perfect holes in the dark and never once measured twice. Number 10, the turpentine hack. In the Pine Belt, running from the Carolinas through Georgia into Florida, an entire industry rose and died on a tool most Americans have never heard of. The turpentine hack was a heavy, curved blade on a short handle, weighted with a lead-filled pole so gravity did the cutting. The men who swung it were called choppers, and the work was called chipping. Each week, a chopper walked his crop, as many as 10,000 longleaf pines assigned to one man, and cut a fresh V into the face of every single tree so the resin would keep bleeding into the clay cup below. Then he walked them again the next week, and the next. Naval stores were once one of the South's biggest exports, feeding turpentine, rosin, and pitch to the paint, soap, and shipping trades. And the industry ran on brutal labor, much of it black. Much of it worked under debt peonage in camps deep in the woods. long after that was supposed to be illegal. The hack was the whole job. Men judged one another by the cleanness of a streak, because a sloppy cut killed the tree and killed the season. Then chemistry arrived. By the 1950s, sulfuric acid paste made the resin flow without chipping. And by the 1970s, the whole business had moved to the craft paper mills, where turpentine came out as a byproduct of pulping. The camps emptied, the hacks rusted, and the scarred cat-faced pines still standing in the southern woods are the only monument that trade ever got. Number 9, the ice axe. Before the refrigerator, America ran on frozen lake water, and cutting it out took an axe built for nothing else. Ice harvesting was a full winter industry in Maine, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and upstate New York. And at its height in the 1880s, tens of thousands of men and horses worked the lakes as soon as the ice hit 16 inches. Horse-drawn plows scored the surface into a grid. Long-bladed saws cut the grid into floating cakes. And the ice axe, narrow, chisel-like, sometimes double-ended with a spud on the reverse, did the work no machine could, breaking the last connection, splitting a cake that jammed, and freeing blocks that had welded back together in the channel. A 300-pound cake of ice was worth pennies at the lake and real money in a New York icebox in July. And the whole chain started with a man standing on a floating slab in February with an axe. Falling in was routine and drowning was common. The industry died fast and completely. Mechanical refrigeration hit commercial scale in the 1920s. The electric home refrigerator went mainstream during the 1930s, and by 1940 the great ice houses stood empty or burned. Nobody bothered to remember the tool. Today the ice axe is misidentified constantly, sold at auction as a mountaineering relic, or a fireman's tool, or a pick of unknown purpose. It was none of those. It was the cutting edge of a vanished season, when winter itself was a crop and men harvested a lake the way they'd harvest a field. Number 8, the cruiser. The cruiser was the axe of the man who decided which trees died. Timber cruisers walked ahead of the logging crews, sometimes weeks ahead, alone, in country nobody had mapped, estimating board feet, marking section corners, and blazing the lines the fallers would follow. They needed an axe that could do a felling axe's work in a pack axe's weight, and the answer was a double bit, usually 2.5 pounds, hung on a 28-inch handle. It went for about $2.25 in a 1930s hardware catalog. The 2 bits mattered more than the size. One edge was kept razor sharp for blazing, one clean stroke peeling a bright white face onto a trunk that a crew could see from 100 yards off. The other was ground blunter and used for the dirty work, chopping through roots, driving a stake, prying, and hitting the frozen or gritty wood that would ruin a fine edge. A cruiser could lay out a whole quarter section with that axe and nothing else. He also used it as a walking staff on side hills and as a defensive tool, and he slept next to it. The profession outlasted the tool. Cruisers still work today, but they carry aerial photos, GPS, spray paint, and a realiscope, and the last thing they need is 2.5 pounds of steel. The blazed line, that trail of white faces cut into standing timber, readable for decades, was one of the most elegant navigation systems ever invented in America, and it was written entirely with an axe. Number 7, the foot adze. The adze was the axe turned sideways, and it was the tool that made wood flat. Instead of the bit facing forward, it faced back toward the user, so the swing came down between the feet and shaved the surface of a timber in long curling ribbons. Ship's carpenters used it to fair a hull. House carpenters used it to level a floor joist. Wheelwrights, coffin makers, and bowl carvers all had their own version, with the curve of the blade tuned to the job. And the man swinging it stood on the timber he was cutting, taking strokes that landed an inch from his own toes thousands of times a day. The old shipyard line that you could tell a green adze man by his boots was not a joke. In the yards at Bath, Maine, and Mystic, Connecticut, a good adze man could hold a surface flat enough to satisfy a straight edge across 20 feet, working entirely by eye and sound. There was no joiner plane big enough to do it any other way. What killed the adze was the sawmill. Once a mill could deliver a beam already dressed on four sides, the whole trade of flattening wood by hand evaporated, and it happened fast. Most working adzes were already dead by 1900, a full half-century before the chainsaw took the felling axe. That makes the adze the first casualty on this list, and the most complete. Almost nobody alive today has watched one used properly, and the ones that survive are usually hanging on a wall with the blade pointed the wrong way. Number 6. The goose-wing broadaxe. Of every axe ever made in America, none looks less like an axe than the goose-wing. Brought over by German settlers into Pennsylvania in the 1700s, its blade sweeps out in a long, asymmetrical wing, a foot or more of edge, with the handle socketed at an angle and canted hard to one side so the user's knuckles cleared the timber. It was beveled on one side only, and it came in left-handed and right-handed versions because with a single bevel there was no such thing as an ambidextrous hewer. Pennsylvania Dutch smiths made them individually, stamped them with their own touch marks, and inlaid them with brass and hearts and tulips. A man might own one goose-wing his entire working life and hand it to his son. It hewed the timbers of the great Pennsylvania bank barns, and it left a signature, a shallow, scalloped surface that you can still read on the beams today. Each marked the width of the blade, each one a single stroke. The goose-wing died in stages. American factory broadaxes were cheaper and good enough. Then balloon framing arrived in the 1830s and made hewn timber unnecessary. Then the mills finished it. But the goose-wing has had a strange afterlife. Because it was beautiful, people kept it. Antique dealers now sell decorated Pennsylvania goose-wings for thousands of dollars, and collectors argue over touch marks. It survives not because it worked, plenty of dead axes worked, but because a German blacksmith in 1780 decided a working tool deserved to look like art. Number 5, the Pulaski. This one has a birthday and a name attached, and both were written in fire. In August of 1910, the Big Burn swept 3 million acres across Idaho, Montana, and Washington in 2 days. Ranger Ed Pulaski, trapped with a crew of 45 men, marched them into an abandoned mine tunnel at gunpoint and held them there through the night while the forest exploded outside. 5 died. Pulaski survived, badly burned and nearly blind, and afterward he went to work in a Wallace, Idaho blacksmith shop on the tool that carries his name, an axe bit on one side, a narrow grub hoe on the other, on a single head. The logic was pure fireline. A crew building a break needs to cut brush and scrape mineral soil, and every extra tool on a man's shoulder is weight he can't carry up a ridge. The Pulaski did both. The Forest Service was slow to adopt it. Pulaski himself never got a patent or a dime. But by the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps had put it in the hands of tens of thousands of young men, and it became the single most recognizable tool in American wildland firefighting. And here's what separates it from everything else on this list. It never left. Hotshot crews carry a Pulaski today, in 2026, up the same ridges for the same reason. A chainsaw can't scrape a line. It's the only axe on this list the machine age couldn't kill. And it exists because one man walked out of a burning mine tunnel and decided to fix something. Number 4, the splitting maul and wedges. The felling axe cut the tree down. The maul was what turned it into winter. A splitting maul ran 6 to 8 pounds. Some of the old rail-splitting monsters went to 12, with a thick, wedge-shaped bit that didn't cut so much as force wood apart along its own grain, and a heavy, flat pole for driving steel wedges into anything that refused. Nobody swung a maul the way they swung an axe. You lifted it, let it fall, and let physics do the rest. Because 8 pounds coming down from overhead 10,000 times a season will destroy a man who fights it. And for a farm family, the season was real. A house heated with wood burned 5 to 8 cords a winter, and every one of those cords was split by hand, usually in the fall, usually by everybody. The knots got the wedges. Elm got cursed at. Oak split like it wanted to. This was also the tool of the rail splitter, the man who turned a straight oak trunk and defense rails with a maul, a wedge, and hardwood gluts, and it was that specific labor that put Abraham Lincoln's nickname on a campaign banner in 1860. Hydraulic splitters arrived for the home market in the 1970s, and they won because they're safer and faster and they don't care about knots. But every man who ever heated with wood will tell you the same strange thing about the maul. It was the only work that warmed you twice, and some of them still miss it. Number 3, the broad axe. Before there was a sawmill within 100 miles, there was a man, a tree, and a broad axe. And that's how America got its beams. The process was called scoring and hewing, and it took 2 axes. First, the felling axe cut a series of notches down the length of a downed log, straight to a chalked line. Then the broad axe took over, a massive head, often 7 to 12 pounds, with a bit up to 14 inches wide, beveled on one side only, hung on a short handle bent away from the timber, so the hewer's hands cleared the face. He walked the log sideways, taking slabs off between the score marks, and when he was done, a round tree was a square beam, true within a quarter inch over 30 feet, cut entirely by eye. A good hewer squared 40 feet of pine in a day. Every log cabin, every colonial house frame, every covered bridge, every barn sill in the country came out of that work, and it was the defining skill of the American frontier, the thing that separated a man who could build from a man who could only chop. The sawmill ended it, and the sawmill was merciless. By 1880, most of the country could buy a sawn beam cheaper than it could hew one, and the broad axe went from essential to ornamental inside about 2 generations. What's left is the evidence. Pull the drywall off an old house in New England and look at the beam above your head. Those flat facets across the face are axe marks, each one a stroke by a man whose name nobody wrote down. Number 2, the double-bit felling axe. Nothing in the American woods was ever more feared or more loved than the double bit. 2 edges, 4 to 5 pounds of head, a 36-inch straight handle, straight because a curved handle cannot be reversed. And it was the standard weapon of the professional logger from roughly 1880 through the 1940s in the big timber of Michigan, the Pacific Northwest, and the Redwood Coast. The 2 bits were a system, not decoration. One edge was ground thin and honed to a shaving edge for the undercut and the felling face. The other was ground thicker and used for limbing, for hitting grit and bark, and for the knots that would roll a fine edge in one blow. A faller flipped the head without breaking stride and never had to stop and file. The straight handle also meant a man could swing it left-handed on a back cut without changing anything. It was also, and everyone admitted it, the most dangerous hand tool in America. The bit facing you never stopped facing you. A glancing blow, a slick log, a moment of tired inattention, and the second edge came home. Loggers carried the scars and told the stories, and the camps ran on a mix of pride and fatalism about it. 2 things ended the double bit. The one-man chainsaw arrived after the war, and the safety men arrived right behind it. By 1970, the double bit was banned outright on most crews and most public land. The best felling axe America ever built was legislated out of the woods. Number 1, the single bit American felling axe. And in first place, the axe that cleared a continent. It didn't come from Europe. European axes had thin heads and no meaningful pole, and in the dense virgin hardwood of the eastern forest they bounced, stuck, and broke handles. So American smiths, working through the 1700s, did something nobody else had. They put weight behind the eye. That heavy pole balanced the head, and suddenly an axe stopped twisting in the swing and started landing where a man aimed it. Then came the patterns: Michigan, Jersey, Dayton, Connecticut, Kentucky, Rockaway, Puget Sound, dozens of regional shapes, each one tuned to local timber and local argument. and men held opinions about them the way they held opinions about religion. The industry that followed was enormous. The Collins Company of Collinsville, Connecticut, founded in 1826, was turning out thousands of axes a day. Kelly Axe in Alexandria, Indiana, and later Charleston, West Virginia, claimed to be the largest axe works on earth. Plum, Man Edge Tool, and dozens more filled the Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogs, where a first-quality felling axe cost about $1 in 1900, a day's wage for a tool that would outlive the buyer. Every homestead had one. Every barn, every fence, every railroad tie, every cord of firewood, every cleared acre from the Alleghenies to the Cascades came off the edge of this axe. And the men who used it developed skills that read now like folklore. They cut a hinge by feel and dropped a 100-foot tree onto a stake. They swung 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and filed the edge every night by lamplight. They could read a lean, a wind, and a rot pocket from the ground. Then in 1949, McCulloch put a 25-pound one-man chainsaw on the market, and it was over faster than anyone expected. A saw did in 90 seconds what an axe did in half an hour. The camps converted in a decade. The Great American Axe Works closed one by one, Collins gone from Collinsville by 1966. The rest absorbed, sold off, or shut down. What died wasn't the tool. Steel doesn't die. What died was the knowledge. How to hang a head, how to file a bit to the right profile for the wood you had, how to swing all day without wrecking your back, how to make a tree fall exactly where you said it would. That was carried in hands, not books, and hands don't leave records. Across all 15 entries, from the boy's axe that started a life's education to the American felling axe that cleared a continent, these tools tell one story: that skill used to live in a man's hands, and the machine didn't steal it. We handed it over, gladly, for speed. Some of it was worth trading. The chainsaw saved backs and lives. But somewhere in the exchange, we stopped being men who could do things and became men who could operate things. Your great-grandfather knew every axe on this list by name. Now you do too.